All right, hey guys, welcome to Friday Night Bible Study through the book of Romans, verse by verse. So we are in chapter 1, and again, Romans is a very fantastic study. One of the plainest and simplest teaching on our salvation. I said last time that um, um, when you think about how God is revealing our salvation, you said there's the legal side, and then there is the vital side. And Romans is going to take us through. By the time we get to chapter 8, you will have such a clear understanding of your salvation, why you are saved. You will understand and you will be assured, again, one from the legal side and the other from the vital side. It's now over the decades for me. It's just always hard to understand why, and I have to say most Christians are so biblically illiterate on this simple message of salvation. I say that because of the denominations. Most denominations, which means then most Christians, believe that they have to do something. They have to earn their way to heaven. Earn their way to heaven. But and by the way, let me just say this, because this is what we're going to kind of get into. If you got into last week, understanding the human nature side of it, why we are sinners, why we are doomed to sin, and then why you could never, ever, by good deeds, by living holy, by living right, earn your way to heaven. So let's kind of jump into this. I mean, it's going to be. I mean, again, I'm so always just flabbergasted, and I should, by all means, remember. I look. I at one time. I don't want to come off like I'm so above, because for decades I struggled with understanding salvation. I remember I've been a Christian for 47 years, and I could tell you that, especially in the early in my when I first became a Christian, that I can't tell you how many times I said the sinner's prayer. And because it's funny, because the sinner's prayer, depending on who's reciting it, you would say, well, wait a minute, I didn't say the sinner's prayer that way, so maybe I'm not saved. But even as we said, when we talk about the debate of once saved, always saved debate, that the fallacy of the argument always lies on not understanding what God did in terms of salvation. So anyway, I want to get back to let's go to Romans and where we left off and where I'm going to continue. Okay. And I'm going to start at 18 again. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. So, in other words, God is not just, people ask this, and they always ask the wrong questions. They give the wrong parameters from. They give the wrong parameters of of when we talk about hell. Even though, yes, I would agree, hell is frightening. I cannot even think about. Uh, I can't think about it before my mind tunes out. And one of the things is I don't have to. But you have people that will say, "Well, Why is God sending people to hell?" And the idea is that they're acting as if they're not guilty. So they're acting as if, well, God is just unfair. But I want to get into. We're going to explain why, and then of course it's going to come back to why are you rejecting God's message? See, that's what it comes down to. Why are you rejecting God's message? So the wrath of God is revealed against heaven, against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. That's where the wrath of God's not just picking on anybody. God is not just, oh, somebody's going to walk up one day, he's like, man, why am I in the wrath line? The great judgment, right? Why am I here? I mean, I obeyed the law. I paid my taxes. I didn't jaywalk, right? I tried to be a good person, but you miss a whole lot right here. God's wrath is against godlessness. So the question is, why aren't you receiving his message? Why aren't you receiving his salvation? So then he says, since what can be known about God is evident among them because God has shown it to them, for his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, has been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse. So again, when people stand before God, the judgment is not going to be the manufactured argument that people make today. For though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for image resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles. All right, here's where we left off. Therefore, God delivered them over in the cravings of their heart. And I'll stop right there because I am exploring, let's break this down when he says the cravings of their heart. And so I said last time, let me kind of come out of this and go back to, so we can understand, we can understand, um, we can understand how we work. In other words, what or why are we condemned? Why are we sinners? Okay, so watch this. We came here. We said that man is when we're talking about man, so we were talking about the complete human, the complete entity. So man is a spirit, has a soul, and lives in a body. And so since man is a spirit, has a soul, live in a body, we were breaking down what that means. What is, so you start off, and let's start off with Adam. Everybody after Adam, everybody after Genesis 3, we don't know this side, but Adam was created alive. When I say alive, spirit, soul, and body. When we talk about death, because when God created Adam and he set him in the tree, he set him in the garden, and he pointed to the tree and said, look, you're free to eat of any tree of the garden, but in the tree in the midst of the garden, you shall not eat of it. He says, the day you eat of it, you will die. Now, philosophically, people ask, well, then why did God put him there so that he could fall? Well, God didn't put him there so he can fall. God put him there and then gave him every other tree. Did God know he was going to fall? Yes. So you said, did God set him up to fall? No. Because literally God gave him every other tree. Now you got to ask Adam, well, Adam, why did you fixate on the tree that God told you not to eat? I mean, there were other options for Adam. Adam could have said, okay, well, the tree is off limits. Okay? So let's not think about that. And by the way, with Adam, let me come back to this for a moment. Let's do some exploring here. Let's go to Genesis. Genesis chapter 2. Look at verse number 15. It says, and the Lord God, so this is the creation, and the Lord God took the man, put him in the garden of Eden to tend and to keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. Now the word die here comes also from the same word, death. And the root word for death means to be separate, to separate. Now, there's spiritual death, and then there is physical death. And then, of course, there is the eternal death, meaning separation from God, to be separated from God eternally. We call it the judgment, okay, lake of fire and brimstone. When we talk about this word death, to be spiritually dead, let me say this and I'll go back. So the question always people may ask is, why did God put man in the garden? Verse 15 again, of every tree, he says, you are freely to eat. Again, there were options for Adam because he literally had every other tree. In fact, keep this in mind, at this time, Adam existed in as perfect conditions as you could dream of. One of the questions that I will have, if I'm allowed to, ask it when I get to heaven, why, Adam? Why? Okay. His options could have been, okay, the tree is off limits. I'm not going to go in. I'm not going to eat of the tree. So when people ask, well, God was the one that was unfair by putting the tree in Adam's path so that he can fall. No, think about this. You're walking down the street. You see a fence. You see a gate, and it says, don't enter. Authorized personnel only. Okay, you have options. You don't have to enter. So if you enter into that gate, there are several things that could happen to you. You could be mauled by a dog. You could be arrested for trespassing. The whole point is that you didn't have to go in. You could say, you could let your curiosity overtake you, and you could say, well, I just want to see what's behind there. You don't have to. That all you need to know is, authorized personnel only, do not enter. All right, so Adam had options, one of which, don't eat of the tree. Just, okay, leave it alone. He had the run of the world, perfect climate, no hail, rain, no cold, perfect climate. He had the run of the world. He could have traveled, right? He could have traveled. Whether it occupies time on the tree, he could have traveled, right? He had time. And then, of course, with him and Eve could have traveled, right? Uh, Things were perfect. They didn't have to worry about wild animals mauling them down. Everything was perfect. So he had options. So this death that God was talking about then, all right, so he said, in the day that you eat of the tree, you will die. Well, Adam ate of the tree, as we know in chapter 3. He ate of the tree and lived 930 years later. Okay? Or he lived for 930 years, not necessarily 930 years later. Why was that? Well, remember, man is the spirit, he is the soul, and the body. His spirit is the one that is alive. When we looked at this, we said that your spirit is the inner man, that's the real you. So your spirit and the soul, they are inseparable, and you can be, and we know will be, separated from your body. And so we saw different aspects last time, a couple of examples of death, and then what happens after death. So the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus is transfigured, and then Moses and Elijah shows up. What were we looking at? Well, we were looking at their spirit and their soul, not their body. We looked at the example, we read the example of Jesus telling the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The poor man, Lazarus, and the rich man both died, both were buried. So when their body died, their soul and spirit, and we see this picture of them after death. What are we looking at? Well, we're looking at their inner man, the spirit. Okay? So your spirit, now for Adam, in terms of his spirit, was alive unto God, meaning he wasn't separated from God. He wasn't alienated from God. God said, but if you eat of this tree, you will die, meaning you will be alienated from me. So when Adam ate of the tree, he was alienated, he was cut off, and now he began to exist apart from God. Now, because he existed apart from God, he no longer received knowledge, revelation, light. He no longer experienced God's presence. He was cut off from God. Now man began to live from his what's called lower nature, his body. And so I want to pick up on this because this is important here. Now, through your body, okay, so through your spirit, you have your awareness of God. You have your communion with God. But now, since Genesis 3, no one has that. You're dead to God. You're cut off from God. So now we live by the urges of our bodies. So that's why I said now God gave them over to the craving, their cravings. Now those cravings come through your body, through your sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. And remember in 1 John, he says, don't love the world, because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, okay, that's what's in the world. And then he says, and the entire world is under the sway of the evil one. So those lusts, they come through your sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. That information dumps into your soul, which is your mind, your emotion, desires, and your will. So how does this work? So now, because we don't have the light of God, not until you're saved, we'll get back to that in a moment, you get your information only from your body. So all that's in the world, that lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, they come through your body, your sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. So think about what's out there in the world. Think about what we are exposed to. The sinfulness of the world. Even when we have like new technology, think about even with all of these social breakthroughs. Think about this, with all the breakthroughs. What is the first thing that happens? Pornography gets in there. Think about these robots, and they're getting better, right? These kind of living dolls, right? They're these robots that look like women, and they're getting better in terms of skin. And then, of course, some of them are supposed to be now smart robots that they're kind of learning. So they're going to tell you, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, right? You feel good. And they're supposed to even learn, okay? But think about the first thing that these dolls are used for: sex, lust, enticing, right? But why do they entice? Because now let's go back to the body. Let's go back to the body. All that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, okay, is absorbed through our what? Sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. Now, our bodies then are living organisms, what God designed to be enjoyed is also corrupted by sin. Now, your body itself, it just seeks to be gratified. That's it. Just seeks to be gratified. That your body, all it does is seeks to be gratified. It's just kind of on. So now let's just think about if your body has its way, because it's going to what? Urge you. It's going to keep putting the urges on you. Let's say, for example, food, right? It could be food, drink, alcohol, drugs, right? But what's the common denominator in all of that? It feels good. If I could, and I was just actually thinking about this the other day, the old hostess, okay, the company hostess, and then all of the sweets that they made, ding dongs, pies. And I was just thinking about that. And of course, my mind went to, I would love to have not the new version, but the old, right? Apple pie, the hostess, or a ding dong. Now, my body, because it feels good, because it tastes good, my body could eat 100 ding dongs, 100 apple pies, because it feels good. Never, it doesn't care that it's unhealthy. That if you just all you ate, you would end up diabetic and all kinds of other stuff, right? That would be unhealthy. Your body doesn't care. It's going to keep craving it. And then if I just take one bite, what's it going to do? I want another bite. I want another bite. Right? Same thing with alcohol, drugs. What's the common denominator? It feels good. And then your body now, the cravings, they make you, it craves. Your body is craving, right? It craves. And what happens? your mind, your emotions, all of a sudden you desire. Like I was telling you right now, as I was thinking about the hostess. So now my mind can remember. My mind, this is my soul, because my body is now telling me, boy, you want that hostess. You want that hostess pie. Now my mind can remember. My mind remembers that hostess. And now my desires is for that hostess. That's no joke. My mind is actually thinking that. Okay. And in fact, if I knew where one's at, I'd probably, after this thing, run over there and get me a hostess pie. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I'll tell you if I even funnier story. And this was a number of years ago. I used to do hospital visitation. And remember I was visiting a dear sister who's with the Lord now. But as I was, we was having Bible study and stuff. And I remember she, I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was her niece, but it was a little child at the time, and they had all these kind of baby toys, dolls, and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things they had was like a supermarket kind of thing, carts. But they also had, and I kid you not, there was when I say brand, it was a store brand. So the supermarket in our area, the store brand, they had chocolate chip cookies. To my shame, I remember looking at that, it caught my eye, and I love those chocolate chip cookies. And do you know that temptation for those chocolate chip cookies plagued me, even while I was having Bible study and all that. And I remember after that, I drove straight to the store and bought those cookies, to my shame. Gave in to that lust, right? Because my body was craving it. And yes, they were satisfying. Oh, yes, they were satisfying. Okay, they taste good. Now, again, were they healthy? That's a whole other story, right? But why did that happen? Because excuse me, the body craves it. It pushes it. It craves it. Craving. Okay. Now let's get into more things. Like, okay, look, what about now temptation? Right? How about temptation? The lust of the eyes, the sex, right? The temptation, because your body, sex feels good. See the common denominator? Your body just wants to be gratified. So now all of a sudden, guess what? And the world gives us plenty of lust through how women dress, what's on television, right? Always, you know, the sex is always good on TV, right? The sex is always good. You see a woman that's on the phone handling her business, a man will come up behind her and grope her, and all of a sudden she's like, ah, ah. Now, in reality, if you do that, like, get away in reality. So, but again, but what the image does? It entices. It entices. So one of the things too, so what Christians need to understand is that your body, until it is redeemed, and this is the kind of interesting here, when we get saved, there's still kind of a darkness. Our spirits are born again. Our spirits are alive. But the world is corrupt. The world, there's a darkness. So we don't perceive like we do physically. We see the world around us. We don't see that spiritually. But we are alive unto God. There's a consciousness there, but we don't perceive that spiritual realm. So there's a tug of war. There's a tug of war between our spirit and our bodies. And what we need to overcome is to say, don't listen to your body, because the cravings are always going to be there. I often tell people this, that you see sometimes in television where you see a guy that's standing up there while a woman trying to seduce him, and he's just standing up there. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Because your body wants to be touched. Your body wants to be seduced. Don't let it. See, there's certain you could say streets or certain doors I'm not going to go in. Why? Because if I go in, yes, I'm going to be seduced. I'm going to be tempted. So there's certain things no, I'm not going to go there, because I know. I I say this jokingly, that if you hear of a rumor that me and Beyonce were found in a hotel room, it's true. And I say that jokingly. I say because I won't go into the room with Beyonce, right? And by the way, it's not even a fantasy. I know, I'm just using this as illustration. Okay. Um, but yeah, if I was in the room, if I was in the bed, it's on. It's on. And I'm saying this jokingly, but my point is that how would I avoid that temptation? Which would never happen. I acknowledge. But how would I wouldn't go, no, I'm not going there. No, she called, ain't taking her call. Hey, can you meet me at the hotel? No. That's how you fight the temptation. Now, same thing with alcohol. Alcoholics have to learn. See, their body will always crave liquor, always crave it. Their body's going to say, come on, just one sip. So the thing is, no, not even a sip. And if going to some place where, you know, certainly like a bar, obviously, but I mean, sometimes there are places that have bars, right? And they're food places, or sometimes you're going to an outing or an event, okay? But the idea is that no, I'm not going to go that way, right? I'm not going down there. I'm not going to take the sip at all. Water, please, water, soda, but not. Why? Because your body's always going to crave. Same thing with drugs, drug addiction. What is the common denominator? It feels good, and your body will put tremendous pressure, cravings for you to just satisfy that craving. So no, I'm not going to go down the road that's going to put me in a compromising situation of weakness. Okay? All right. So, but that's how our body works. So again, what happens is that through the renewing of the mind, of the word, so your mind is renewed, in which also then your mind controls, right, your emotions, your desires, and all, most important, your will. Sometimes so the battle becomes what our wills are weak, because what we give into that. And by the way, there's no condemnation in the Lord. So look, we all fall. So guess what? God, yes, uh, um, Jesus is our peace. We'll get to that later, further down in Romans. Jesus is our peace. And all right, so let's kind of go back. I wanted to. Uh, I wanted to. So that we can have an understanding in verse 26 when he says, this is why God delivered them over to degrading passions. This one, no, verse 24. Therefore, God delivered them over. Now it's kind of interesting since we did read that. Notice the idea that he said God delivered them over. Okay, God delivered them over. Now, why did God deliver them over? Because they suppressed the truth. Because when they knew God, they didn't glorify him as God. So then God gave them over. God delivered them over in their cravings of their hearts. Okay, so then here's the result. Therefore, God delivered them over to the cravings of their heart, to sexual impurity. Now, if you're old school, the word fornication, okay, the word fornication is used, and in a lot of respects, I like fornication. It's translated to different, kind of languages and translations, but sexual impurity is the same because what sexual impurity is good, all right? So sexual impurity is the more modern use, but fornication, I think it has a ring to it. But sexual fornication, sexual immaturity, basically it is the unbiblical sexual use. Now, which includes, but not limited to, sex outside of marriage or the God ordained marriage. And that's important because it's not, we're going to get into this later, probably not today. So we're going to get into, of course, the homosexuality. And the idea of, does God join together two men or two women in marriage? And believe it or not, I say that because there's a church, and I guess there's some churches. For example, I guess there's a church that's been out there for a number of years where the pastor is gay and his husband is the first gentleman, right? And we'll get to that. And this is the thing where that marriage is not recognized by God. So basically, they are involved in sexual impurity. All right. But any sex outside of the God ordained marriage, and I have to put that in all caps, God ordained marriage. So any sex outside. So that's why fornication is sex, outside of marriage. That's why it's called fornication. Adultery, even though a lot of times in scripture, adultery is listed apart from fornication. However, fornication can encompass all sex outside of the God ordained marriage. So that also would say bestiality. I may say, ooh, yeah. But I have to tell you, there seems to be an interest now because I'm, with the AI or pictures sometimes popping up that all of a sudden you're seeing what I'm calling bestiality. Now it's not actual sex because probably can't get that far yet. But you see dogs kind of like licking on women and they're standing there allowing this to happen. That's what I mean by that. Okay, but that's the world. See, that's the sinful world. That's the sinful world. Um, so homosexuality, which include all of the letters of the LGBTQ, right? I'm gonna kind of get into that because just a few verses down, we're going to get into that because some of the trans, and I'm gonna get into that. I'm gonna wait to get more into that because This thing is kind of interesting to me, especially when you get into more of the mentality part of it. But in terms of just you know, a person who, notice how he said God delivered them over to the craving of their heart, and that sinful behavior. Now there are people that will probably disagree with me on that. It's still around, but a kind of number of years ago, there was this phrase that came out that was called down low. And what the down low was, what happened was there were these men who were married, and then they would get together with men and they would have sex with men. But here's the kicker. The men were saying, I love my wife. I'm not gay. I just like to have sex. Just like to have sex with men. That was part of the down low. Now, some of them obviously were gay, but what caught the attention was a lot of some of these down low brothers that were secretly having, gay sex, were saying, well, I'm not gay. I just like to have sex. I was like, boom. And I want to say that I I can agree with that. But I say agree because with this, look at this, the cravings of their heart. And when you go back in history, like in Rome, the Roman time, right at the time that Paul is writing this, his writings to First Corinthians, and in First Corinthians, when he dealt with, that's one of the reasons why you see his use of the word sanctification. That you, as a Christian, your body and its members are set apart for God and only God. Because sexual impurity was rampant in the Corinthians. There was a phrase about being Corinthianized, meaning corrupted by the sexual immorality of the Corinthians. And then throughout Rome, there was, again, it wasn't like how we think today. Again, I'm going to get more into it because the idea of the LGBT2 was more so political, and Christians really, really fumbled this because they made that a political issue, social issue, as opposed to a spiritual issue. So, but in Rome, there was homosexuality. There were, I wouldn't call it trans as we call it today, but there certainly were guys that were walking around, you know, looking like women, walking like women, acting like women. Same thing with females. And then there were those who just engaged in sex because it felt good. They didn't care who, male or female. There were debauchery. There was all kinds of stuff, bestiality, because that's what happened. That's the progression of it. And you would have, again, these mass orgies in these particular areas. People were, you know. So that's why he says right here that God delivered them over to the craving. That's kind of, when you look at the setting of Rome and the Roman culture, it was sexually corrupt. Now, Paul is saying that, okay, God gave them over to the cravings of their heart. He gave them over to the cravings of their heart. Okay? So that their bodies were degraded among themselves. And he says they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worship and served something created instead of the Creator who is praised forever. Amen. So notice again very clearly what he's talking about. So that their bodies were degraded among themselves. The unholy use of their bodies. Okay? So, all right, we're going to pick this up here because Paul really is going to go in on this in detail. And then we will kind of balance it, of course, what's going on today. And part of the problem, I'll say this before I close, as Paul wasn't dealing with this, he was pointing out the sin. The problem with how Christians are approaching is that they're singling out just one group, the LGBT, and fighting against that. And they're losing the battle because they want to outlaw it. They want to make laws and stuff like that. And I'll get more into that, but that's where the problem coming in. You notice what Paul is doing? Paul is dealing with the sin that we all kind of wrestle with. Maybe not LGBT, but maybe you're an adulterer. Maybe you're just a fornicator. Okay? In other words, from God's standpoint, it's still corrupt, it's still sinful. And the problem is to make only one, kind of single out one group and say let's attack that. And I'll get more into why the evangelical did that. It was planned, it was strategic, but it missed the point because now you're not sharing the truth of God's word. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you next Friday evening as we study the book of Romans.